I'm telling you, son, there's nothing good on the radio these days. What do you mean? It's just they don't make music like they used to. Oh, so music today is worse than it was back then? Well, yes, more or less. Wait, I thought you didn't listen to new music because you're always listening to your old CDs and stuff. Well, the thing is... And what about all the music that came out before you were born? Is that music bad too? No, that's not... Well, then how do you know the music is getting worse? Did you go to school for music? So then how can you speak so authoritatively on the subject? Son. Yeah, Dad. Be quiet. Music oversimplified. Whew. Okay, let's do this. Music. Music is without a doubt an absolutely enormous topic. A topic so large, in fact, that likely no single individual in the world can fully comprehend it. And yet, it is a topic that I personally feel very passionately about. So please join me as I try to make sense of this thing we call music. Let's begin with the most obvious question. What is music? Music is sound that is organized. Sound is vibration that propagates as an acoustic wave through a transmission medium such as a gas, liquid, or solid. Here's a question. What was the first music and the first instrument? Well, it's hard to say for certain, but perhaps it was the heart and the voice. If you work in the medical field, you might be familiar with this, an electrocardiogram, or EKG. An electrocardiogram is a recording of the heart's electrical activity through repeated cardiac cycles. Using this, medical professionals can study the heart's rhythm. If that rhythm deviates from the norm, bad things can happen. So in a very real way, humans can't live without music. And maybe it's just me, but an EKG looks kind of similar to this. So why do humans make music? We do it to express emotion, to dance, for fame and prestige, and to learn and to teach. We do it for courage during war, and for more adult activities. We do it to celebrate achievements, and to appease our gods. Now, believe it or not, despite these variety of reasons, all music ever made can generally be organized into 3 categories. Those categories are folk music, classical music, and popular music. Here's a good question. Why do you think music wasn't made primarily for money prior to 1860? Of course, these 3 categories can further be broken down by era, region, and sound. This leads us to genres, but we'll get into genres later. For now, let's look at the first category of music ever.
I'm a full waver, as many one knows. I've now died and I've wore out me clothes. Me clogs are both broken and stockings I've none. The dadly gimme tuppence for all I've getten on. Out Billy at Benty kept telling me long.
The name folk music can sometimes be confusing. That's because there are 2 types of folk music, traditional folk music and contemporary folk music. In this case, we're referring to traditional folk music. However, even more troublesome is attempting to define folk music. In a way, folk music is really just music. It's the music that has been made since the beginning of human history. The word folk comes from the word folklore, which itself was coined by the English antiquarian William Toms to describe the traditions, customs, and superstitions of the uncultured classes. Of course, it's easy to understand why some feel the term shouldn't be used at all. But for lack of better terminology, simply understand that we are talking about culturally important music copied through a history of oral tradition with often unknown compositional origin. If you're still having trouble pinpointing folk music, ask yourself, is this song related to national culture or pride? It's probably folk music. Does the song celebrate important life milestones? It's probably folk music. Does no one know where the song came from? Probably folk music. And lastly, folk music is copyright free. Now, for thousands of years, folk music was the only type of music that existed. Then one day, someone had an idea. What if music didn't have to be passed down orally? What if maybe, just maybe, it could be written down? A fundamental aspect of classical music is musical notation. Musical notation is how composers write music. Unfortunately, notation is beyond the scope of this video. However, if you're interested, 12 Tone, a channel I highly recommend, has a great video explaining the basics of Western staff notation. I'll include a link in the description. What is within the scope of this video, though, is the instruments commonly used in classical music. Let's begin with an introduction to instruments. A musical instrument is a device created or adapted to make musical sounds. Classifying instruments is a complex process and a science of its own called organology. Instruments take many forms, but the basic principle they all rely on is the manipulation of vibration. These are the 5 types of instruments. Let's look at percussion first. A percussion instrument is a musical instrument that is sounded by being struck or scraped by a beater, including attached or enclosed beaters or rattles struck, scraped, or rubbed by hand. Examples include the piano, the timpani, the tambourine, and the drums. And by the way, a drum kit is simply a collection of percussion instruments, including a snare drum, a bass drum, toms, and various cymbals. Next, we have woodwind instruments. These are instruments that contain some type of resonator, usually a tube, in which a column of air is set into vibration by the player blowing into or over a mouthpiece set at or near the end of the resonator. Examples include the clarinet, the flute, the oboe, and the saxophone. Also, the human voice, while not a woodwind instrument, is both a wind instrument and a string instrument. A brass instrument is a musical instrument that produces sound by sympathetic vibration of air in a tubular resonator in sympathy with the vibration of the player's lips. Examples include the trumpet, the French horn, the trombone, and the tuba. String instruments, or chordophones, produce sound from vibrating strings when a performer plays or sounds the strings in some manner. Examples include the violin, the shamisen, the double bass, and the harp. Lastly, we have electronic instruments. While not common in classical music, we'll cover them here. An electronic musical instrument, or electrophone, is a musical instrument that produces sound using electronic circuitry. Examples include the theremin, the modular synthesizer, the drum machine, and the sampler. One major way in which classical music is categorized is by era. The most common eras include the medieval era, the Renaissance era, the Baroque era, the classical era, the Romantic era, the Modernist era, and the Postmodern era. And here is a list of notable classical composers. And that brings us to our final category of music. Welcome to the era of recorded sound. The history of popular music starts here. The history of sound recording is both important and fascinating, but I will save that topic for my next video. For now, let's wrap up our discussion of popular music by briefly diving into the world of genres. What's in a genre? As mentioned earlier, there are only 3 categories of music. Further classification is possible, but often problematic. Historians attempt to classify popular music through the use of music genres. A music genre is a conventional category that identifies some piece of music as belonging to a shared tradition or set of conventions. Generally speaking, there are major genres and then subgenres. In addition, there are fusion genres that mix 2 genres together. Important to note, there is no accepted number of subgenres or even major genres. However, if you're like me, then you find that very unsatisfying. So here's my methodology for determining what the major music genres should be. First, it must be music, so no spoken word or comedy. Then it must not be a subgenre. It must not be a fusion genre, and it must not be a derivative genre. It must not be a revival of previous genres like the garage rock revival, and it must not be intended for other mediums such as film scores, commercials, or opera. It must have significant cultural and stylistic origins, and it must have a significant amount of major artists. Lastly, it must have a clear or accepted definition. And with that, the 8 major music genres that I have decided upon are blues, jazz, soul and R&B, funk, rock and roll, reggae, electronic, and hip hop. Do you agree with this list? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to get super nerdy, check out the website everynoise.com. It's like heaven for genre geeks. And that is music oversimplified. Lastly, guys, this is my first YouTube channel, and I want to get to know my audience better. So if possible, share your personal experiences with music below. Are you guys like musicians, students, vinyl collectors, audiophiles, casual listeners, dancers? Whatever it is, let me know. Thanks for watching.